Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be presenting our research paper for international business, and the paper is titled Toward a Legitimacy-Based View of Political Risk, the Case of Google and Yahoo in China. So, starting off with our table of contents, we're going to talk a little bit about the abstract, dig deep into our intro, briefly mention the methodology of the paper, and then discuss the results. And hopefully, we'll spend some more time there. Afterwards, we will be talking about how can it be applied in real life to a multinational company. And furthermore, we are going to conclude with that. So first thing is first, our paper talks about how a government's motivation to intervene is going to be influenced by the broader societal context. Also, it discusses the importance of multinationals' political risk at home. Furthermore, the increasing political risk faced by high-tech and service firms. So the paper argues that there's a need to update the bargaining power and political institutions theories, further develop a legitimacy-based view of political risk, and then basically it examines the political risk experienced by Google and Yahoo at home and abroad due to their activities in China, and thereby illustrate the benefits of a holistic approach to political risk. All right, so in our intro, we're going to start by defining political risk, which is essentially a phenomenon in which government actions may have a negative impact on firm performance. And of course, all tied in our strategic management, international business research, trying to explore what could be the factors that are related to that and how can it be affected, how can it be manipulated and exploited. So the purpose of this article is to take up this challenge and develop such an approach. It basically proposes that there are benefits to examining political risk through the lens of three distinct but complementary perspectives. Essentially, three main constructs are proposed by the paper, and those include bargaining power approach, political institutions approach, and legitimacy-based view. Essentially, bargaining power and political institutions, those two approaches have been implicated in papers before. However, there hasn't been much focus on the legitimacy-based view. This paper does not intend to claim that bargaining power and political institutions are obsolete and only implicate legitimacy-based view. That's not the intention, but the paper wants to explore all the political risk constructs, including those mentioned, making a three theoretical paradigm that is going to be implicated. Moving on to the methodology of the paper explores all three constructs and explores also the strengths and weaknesses of each. Starting with the bargaining power approach, abbreviated BPA, in which it refers to the resources being controlled by one party and demanded by the other, and the ability to withhold resources that the other party wants completes the definition here. As we move on to the political institutions approach, abbreviated PIA, it predicts that because a government may face inherent temptation to alter policies to their advantage, and of course the detriment of that on foreign firms being a factor in creating more political constraints and thereby affecting a multinational company's practices based on the government's ability to change existing policies. As we move on to the third construct, which is legitimacy-based view, legitimacy can be defined as a generalized perception or assumption that the actions of an entity is desirable, proper, or appropriate according to the systems or norms, values, beliefs, etc. Moreover, on that, the paper continues on to expand on all three constructs, and also mentioning the case of Google and Yahoo in China, factoring that Google totally took a different approach than Yahoo. When Google had to plan and negotiate with the Chinese government for a long period of time before they created their own Chinese domain in January 2006. Google became quickly unhappy with the Chinese government's censorship demands and suspected that the government could be behind multiple hacker attacks, and thereby the relationship grew poor, while that of Yahoo is totally the opposite. They signed a pledge to self-censor their services in China, and they even helped the Chinese government collect data and make multiple arrests based on their search engine. Although Yahoo's legitimacy in China remained really high when comparing it to Google's, Yahoo's legitimacy lowered back home as a result of its activities in China. Looking at the results of the paper, it forms this comprehensive framework for a holistic understanding of political risk, and essentially highlighting that the political risk may be heightened and government may intervene, and that could be driven by a complex web of economic, social, and political concerns. And the three main constructs being BPA, PIA, and LBV each provide key insights on these factors. Looking at it critically, the BPA may struggle to explain why governments are selective in their intervention, while PIA may be criticized along similar lines. LBV, on the other hand, may help address the limitations of the previous two constructs. LBV can help account for why a government may or may not desire to intervene. However, one of its limitations is that it cannot account for whether a government has the power or ability to intervene. Each theory is necessary, but not sufficient to explain or predict political risk by itself. Instead, it's argued by the paper that a multi-paradigmatic approach, and that being the three constructs, it incorporates multiple conceptual perspectives and considers both home and host country factors, will result in a better explanatory and predictive power for the political risk that is faced by firms in a broad array of industries in the developing and developed world alike. Moreover, the paper argues that a more holistic approach, provided using multiple theoretical lenses, could help explain better and predict many different firms' political risk experiences. This could be used as an indication of the ways that how these three approaches or constructs together can contribute to a holistic, integrative understanding of political risk phenomena. Looking at the framework and starting with the BPA, we can notice how it focuses on the influence of fixed assets and knowledge spillovers on the balance of power between governments and firms, and how it could help understand the power dynamics between the actors with imperfectly overlapping wants and needs, including the government, firms, and how these dynamics could change over time. And looking at the second construct, PIA, and how the structural attributes of a country's political institutions may actually be a constraint, and they may influence the government's ability to change policies easily, as the construct sheds light on how it recognizes the government being not a unitary actor, but one that is comprised of different branches and different actors who wield the power to act, as well as the power to reject actions desired by others. Looking at the third construct being the legitimacy of a firm, and that may influence a government's motivation to intervene in its activities. So it helps to unpack the black box referred to as how it influences governments to desire to intervene in the operations of some firms but not others. And that highlights how it may be useful in determining why a government may or may not desire to intervene. So the results fulfill and report that this multi-paradigmatic approach creates opportunities to understand better how these conceptual approaches complement each other. And while they may be three approaches, they are not equal in weight in all situations. They are all needed to have a complete picture of a firm's political risk. All right, now looking at how can it be applied in real life, our chosen example is going to be Amazon. And looking back to our paper so we can relate to it, there's at least three emerging contributions from this article, which are BPA, PIA, and LBV, are now better accounted for with evidence. We are going to examine how they can be applied to Amazon to better improve the operations of Amazon. Primarily, we're going to be looking at PIA and BPA to help us see uh, how good of a job they can do to help us explain why a government may interfere with the ability of Amazon to do the operations they want to do. The other factor here, LBV, is going to explain why a government may be more motivated to interfere with Amazon's operations. So starting off with the bargaining power approach and how Amazon could use it is that it may be useful to Amazon to help them gain a balance of power between them and the regulating authorities. So it could help them gain a better understanding of how they could manage the overall power that is accessible to them by the regulating authority, such as a government or so. And that could help them in policy making before they engage in signing an agreement and whatnot. That could be very beneficial in terms of identifying the risk they're taking and understanding how and when they exercise this power of bargaining with the regulating authority. And furthermore, it may help them explore how they can increase their bargaining power over time as they resort to other methods as well. And also, it could help them allocate the resources of their firm in terms of finding better alternatives to get to their goals via prepping their bargaining power, making sure that they're able to get what they're looking for before they find themselves into a deal that they don't want to sign, but they're forced to sign, like what happened with Google after a long-term agreement and planning of their goals, and then realizing that the government will never give them the opportunity to do their operations the way they want. So Amazon could use that approach in order to enhance their scope and better identify what kind of operations that they are going to be able to perform abroad in a host country, realizing the bargaining power they have and understanding the limitations of that as well. An example would be the emerging markets in Africa and Asia, in which Amazon wants to extend its area of operations by using the bargaining power approach. It may give them the ability to deal with governments that have high restrictions and may require censorship of this and that. So these are all factors to take into consideration as Amazon is looking to expand globally further. As per the political institutions approach, Amazon could use it in order to identify, to map out a country's political institutions in order to realize what kind of constraints that they're going to face, what are like the ability of a government to change its policies and how easily can these policies change. And through recognizing that, they're able to see if that is a unitary case where a government actually is the sole actor here, a regulator that may impose or affect their operations. That will give them a better understanding of how politically designed or the infrastructure politically is in whichever host country they're looking to expand to. And of course, that would give them the ability to realize the sources of legislation or political regulation. And furthermore, that may give them a cue into the preferences and what kind of operations are going to be facilitated, agreed upon, and what kind of political operations that may be influenced by policies that could change or very much in the gray area that may affect their operations. So these are all threatening factors that may influence Amazon's political risk assessment. And through exploring whether these changes in a country's political institutions may impose further constraints or not is also a very important byproduct of using a political institutional approach as well to analyze how far they can actually have their operations running and how effectively can these operations run without or with minimal interruption. Furthermore, a legitimacy-based view could be used by Amazon as a way to acquire what kind of influences that actually may lead a regulating authority to intervene in their operations. And thereby, they may unlock the whole sort of scenario that may define what are the triggering factors that lead to a regulating authority having the desire to intervene in their operations. And once they recognize these factors, they will be able to map out what they should be doing and what they should not be doing from a legitimate perspective so that they limit the possibility of seizing operations due to regulating authority interventions. And this could give them a broader scope of how far their operations could progress. And from that point onwards, they're able to have an understanding of the strategies that they're able to follow, gain, maintain, and perhaps in the long run become even more legitimate than the regulating authority expects them to be, and thereby gain a higher level of trust with the regulating authority, and therefore cementing their position and their operations, leading to a better overall agreement with the regulating authorities, having less chances of political risk and hindering of their operations, and thereby ensuring that the operations and practices are up to par with the expectations of the regulating authority. And all in all, that could lead Amazon into having the perspective of which markets they choose to embark on and which ones are more suitable for their operations and what could they do and what should they avoid, etc. Therefore, giving them an eagle-eyed view and understanding of the political risk they face by embarking in endeavors abroad in different regions, as well as in home soil. In conclusion, We realize that over the years, political risk has changed in its nature, but not its importance. And firms' actions can greatly influence their bargaining power, legitimacy, and political institutions with which they have to interact. So, to a larger extent, a firm can mitigate their own political risk and use this holistic approach with new focus on the intriguing and underexplored aspects such as legitimacy, bargaining power, and political institutions in order to have a more and further enhanced scope of understanding into the political risk that their firms may face before going into operations, whether that may be at home or abroad. I would like to thank you for your time and attention. Thank you.